This is connecting.
Okay,
Here we
we're
go.
live.
Five. Here we go. Hey, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to whatever this is. That's the name of the show. That's the name of everything. What are we doing? What planet are we living in? What's going on? I don't know, but I know that David Gillis is going to help us figure that out. David and I have been friends for a long time. I love his wife, which is always a green flag. It's always a green flag to have a really smart, badass wife. And you have written so many incredible books. You actually gave me a quote that I don't know if you remember saying this to me, but I repeat it all the time. And I do bring it back to you. I don't take credit for it. But at when you wrote your last book, I was like, oh my God, da da da. We were talking about it at a party. And you were like, well, writing a book, like I would have made more per hour driving an Uber than writing a book, right?
True.
And that's such a good way to put it. Because I think to so many people, it's just like, oh my God, you had a book deal, and obviously no one complains
Yeah.
about getting book deals, but it is a lot of work. So you have written a second book, which the only reason I don't have it with me is that I'm in a hotel room and I'm not in my house, where I have two amazing copies of Dirtbag Millionaire. Do you have a copy you can put up? There we go.
Billionaire. Dirtbag billionaire.
Billionaire.
With a B.
Billionaire, right. And it is a book that I think explores a lot of topics that I know people are dying to get into, which is just like, do good billionaires exist, right? Like, can there be, or is that like a oxymoron, right? And how can we get more people who have a lot of money to do better things with it? I think that's something that I know I spent a lot of time thinking about. And your book goes into, I'm going to say his name in the French Canadian way.
Okay.
Yves Chinard.
Yves Chinard. I like
That's
that.
how you say it.
I'm going to start saying it that way.
He comes from, I Googled it because I was like, that is French Canadian.
Yeah.
That is like through and through. That's not a French name. That's a French Canadian name.
That's right.
His, I think, maternal or paternal grandmother, was a French Canadian, but he is American, born in the States. Started a company called Patagonia, if you've heard of it. And David wrote an incredible piece of the New York Times. David is also an incredible columnist for New York Times. Covers everything from business to climate. And this is a perfect intersection of, I think, a lot. Two things that you're very known for exploring and doing incredible reporting on, which is this CEO who became a billionaire and then went like, I don't want to be a billionaire. Let me not be a billionaire. Let me, as opposed to most billionaires, instead of hoarding more money, actually try to figure out a way to be a former billionaire. And which is funny because Patagonia to vests are the corporate America uniform, and he kind of wants nothing to do with corporate America. So tell us about Yves Chouinard and what makes him such a special billionaire, and how do we clone him?
How do we clone him?
Yeah.
Again, I'll come back to that one. But the first thing I'll note is that he's no longer a billionaire. And I think he would be so mad if I didn't bring that up. Because in fact, when he heard about the title of this book, Dirtbag Billionaire, he was pissed off. Not because of the word dirtbag. He self-identifies as a dirtbag because in the climbing world, in like the outdoor community from which he sprang, the word dirtbag is like a term of endearment. It refers to someone who's so unenamored with money that they're content to sleep in the dirt. No, when he heard that the book was titled Dirtbag Billionaire, he was pissed off because of the word billionaire. Because the last thing he ever wanted to be known for was a billionaire. And indeed, he no longer is one because he gave it away. Now, we can get into whether or not that was a good thing, whether we agree with how he's spending his money, all that. But at the end of the day, I think it's so important to note what you said was right on. This is a man who never acquired the taste for luxury. And as such, arrived late in his life at a moment when, given the opportunity to cash in his chips, right? To do an IPO or a sale and literally get, $3 million directly into $3 billion into his family's checking account. He said, no thanks. And not only that, his wife was aligned and his children were aligned too. These are people who genuinely wanted nothing to do with extreme wealth. And that alone in this society is so unusual.
Right. And what you've spoken to a lot of CEOs, you spend a lot of time with, business leaders of sort of all kinds. What in his like personality or upbringing, like what made again, because we cannot clone him, not yet. Um, but we can think about how, yeah, like in what environment was he brought into, or what about his personality sort of made him do something that what 99.9% of, of billionaires never do, which is it seems like see sort of the collective good above his own self-interest, you know.
Yeah, and of course, there's no like perfect playbook
Yeah.
for cloning someone like this. What I'll do though is point to, I think, a couple things that when I look back on his life and career, which I know really well at this point, I think are sort of the key ingredients that got him to where he was. The first was that he never wanted to be a businessman. He hated
Mm,
businessmen from the time he was a kid. So he wasn't one of these people who like set out to be an entrepreneur, right? Like he didn't set out to run a company. When he figured out he was running a company, he was like, oh shit, this is exactly what I never wanted to do.
yeah.
And his whole career was sort of a process of distancing himself as much as possible from the actual day-to-day operations. So I
Mm,
think that it speaks to motives, right? He was never
right.
motivated by the pursuit of wealth or the pursuit of power. Now, why was he never motivated by that things? Well, because he cared about other things. And
Mm,
what did he really care about more than anything else was nature and the outdoors. And that can sound like a little woo woo and spacey. And yet, like, if you are privileged to actually spend time deep in the woods or just take like a lovely walk in the park and clear your mind and turn off your phone, we can discover like, oh, it's pretty amazing to be present on
mhm,
this amazing planet. He started doing that from the time he was a tiny kid. And literally, this is a man who never owned a cell phone in his life. He has never had his own email address. He does not and never has owned a computer. And he exists in this almost like Zen-like Buddhist state where
wow.
he is more often than not communing with nature, like in the present moment, rather than like scrolling. And
Mm,
those things, I think, created a foundation that allowed him to be really clear about what mattered and what
mm,
didn't.
wow. I am fascinated by that. It it seems like he, yeah, was driven by something different. But again, having interviewed many other CEOs and many other entrepreneurs, um, does that change with money, right? Like, does money end up changing people? And why didn't that happen with him? What
Yeah.
protected him from that?
It certainly can, right? Let's not be naive.
Yeah,
Um, and there were flashes
yeah,
along the way in my reporting
yeah.
where he talked to people as if he were a little lustful to sort of grow that number, right? Can I add another zero to my net worth?
Yeah.
Um, it was never clear to me that he was entirely serious about that. Some of this was born from a deep rivalry he had with his good friend Doug Tompkins, who remarkably also founded the North Face and Esprit. I mean, these two men, like pioneers,
Mm,
best friends, incredible journey about their lives and friendship, which is all documented in the book as well.
mhm,
And Doug, as he grew wealthy, embraced all the nice things, embraced a fine art collection, bought a red Ferrari with cash, had a private plane, was doing the things you would do if you were worth couple $100 million.
mm,
Yvonne saw that and he didn't want any part of it.
yeah,
And indeed, late in their lives, you see how these pathways diverge. Whereas Chenard is still married to the same woman he met in the 1970s. They have two kids who were also of a mind to renounce their wealth in a
mm,
really like generous and honest way. Doug Tompkins, late in his life, his first wife and their children devolved into bickering over the estate about the money, and his daughter sued his widow, and it just got so ugly. And it
ugh,
was like, I mean, it was like Lord of the Rings. It was like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, like money truly corrupts. They were all
yeah.
going for the ring, and like the guy who said no, like Yvon Chouinard is Bilbo Baggins, and he's like, I don't want it, I'm out.
Wow, it really speaks to something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and please sound off in the comments with questions for David. Because I know my mind is like going in a million directions. Like, one of the things that fascinates me the most about the richest men on earth is how miserable they seem to be. Like Elon Musk, truly, it is mind-boggling for me to see so many young men and women too, but I think particularly young men idolize him, that he is this like aspirational, sort of figure for them. And I just go like, really? Like, you want to be that guy? He seems, I mean, first of all, to be dealing with a tremendous amount of addictions and sort of different coping mechanisms in order to just sort of exist. And yeah, Jeff Bezos doesn't come across as and even you sort of look at old videos of Jeff Bezos and you see him laugh a lot more. You see, there seems to have been more joy there than there is now that he's, one of the richest people on earth. So yeah, like it's almost not in billionaires' interest, right, to make more money and to pursue, and sort of hoard all of that money, even from a self-interested, right, perspective of trying to be happy. Like, is that something that you sort of have seen with different, again, very wealthy individuals that you've interviewed throughout
Uh,
your career?
I'm thinking back to the sort of like pivotal and sort of famous interview I did with Elon in 2019, right? This was right after he made that tweet, taking Tesla private for 420 a share. There were all these rumors that he was on drugs, unconfirmed reports that that was happening, and no
Hmm.
one could get to him. And I got on the case, and after a handful of phone calls, suddenly I got a call. It was like, hold for Elon Musk, and all of a sudden, like, I was not prepared. Boom, I'm on the phone with him, uh,
Oh, wow.
and he says this is off the record, and I was like, oh, I don't want this to be off the record. I was like, well, okay. He's like, I'm hanging up. I was like, okay, we're off the record.
Okay.
And then I say, were you on drugs when you sent the 420 tweet? And he says, no. And I say, is that on the record? And he says, yes. And then, and then we were on the record. But then, and this is, I bring this up for this reason, Liz, is because
Mhm.
we then spent the next question I asked him. I said, Elon, are you okay? And he sort of broke down. And over the next hour, we talked about his emotional state and the fact that he was lonely. And he teared up, and I could hear him crying on the other end of the line because he said he was so lonely. He said he didn't have any friends and he was sleeping under his desk. And that was what I was thinking about when you
Mhm.
talk about sort of the emotional state of billionaires and what that level of wealth can do to
Mhm.
people. It can be so isolating. And I
Mm.
think just to bring it back to Chenard as a counterpoint, what's so remarkable is that he and his family, I mean, I went out and I lived with him. I slept in his son's bed, and I lived with him and his wife for a week in Wyoming. And we cooked pasta together at night. And we sat
Wow.
around the table and drank wine and laughed. And it was like such a pure experience. There was no wait staff, right? Like, we did the
Mhm.
dishes together. And that level of, I don't know how else to say it, like humility, of just actually being present with one another is so divorced from the lives we see so many other billionaires living. And I think there's something deep and instructive in that.
That's fascinating. Liz Fagenshu says, "More money, more problems." Right?
Truly.
Right, and it's sort of counterintuitive, but it's so true. So when you had that conversation with Elon, looking at where we're at 6 years sort of later, um, do you think he made friends? Do you think he went the right direction?
It's not my role to comment on whether Elon went in the right direction or not. But all the um, I don't know, all the afflictions that he
Mhm.
discussed experiencing then are still very much evident when I look at the story now. And I mean, there's been a ton of reporting in the Journal and the Times about his, you know, alleged substance abuse, the fact that he is deeply isolated from some of the people that, have been historically closest to him in his life, including his own children. And
Mhm.
again, that counterpoint is just impossible
Right.
not to acknowledge.
Right. Yeah, it's something I know a lot of people have been thinking about recently with the Charlie Kirk shooting is just I think tech CEOs and there was that entire um lovely dinner that they were all at where they sort of went around the room and gave sort of kissed the ring, said different variety of compliments about Donald Trump. A lot of them were in the front row at the inauguration, and I just coming back to the just horrifying events that unfolded in the real world, but also online, right? That there was a gory, just disgusting and horrifying video that was because of the algorithms that we have that were created by people, just amplified and sort of just there were children, right, who were just on their phones, who that who were sort of forced, or who had no consent in order, before they sort of saw that. And I think overall there's a conversation about the motives, right? What are the intentions of, the people at the helm of these tech companies? And it really does seem to be overall profit over everything else. Um, is there like, and I know you're a reporter, so you're not, it's like I'm asking you a question you're not going to want to answer, but like, do you feel like, well, how do you see the evolution um, of these sort of tech leaders, and do you see a way back for them where they would become someone like Yves Chouinard and see the collective good as the priority, and maybe even their own happiness as a priority instead of profit?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there. I think let me make a couple s- impressionistic remarks,
Yeah,
and then I'll try to answer it as directly as I can.
yeah.
One of the first things that came to mind as you were just saying all that is that, I was the guy at the New York Times 8 years ago who really did a lot of the coverage of corporate America during Trump's first term. And so I
Mm-hmm.
wrote all these stories about how outraged CEOs, including a lot of those same tech CEOs, were 8 years ago when we had things like the Muslim Man, when we had things like Charlottesville. They all used their microphone. They
Yeah.
stood up and said, "This is not American. We don't
Mm-hmm.
believe in this." And the contrast to what is happening today is just shocking, right?
Yeah.
In many cases, it is exactly the same people running exactly the same companies.
Mm-hmm.
And when you could argue the same or worse things,
Mm-hmm.
worse being, the
Sure.
perspective of,
Yeah,
not exactly, I'm not saying,
for
but
sure.
is coming out of the White House, these same people are saying nothing, just silence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's extraordinary. And just a
Yeah.
brief counterpoint, Patagonia is one of the few companies in corporate America that's still screaming from the rooftops that like this is crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
the CEO is out there almost a couple times a week calling on the EPA about like they're destroying their mission and endangering the public. Next thing that came to mind
Mm-hmm.
is something that I clearly forgot as I started to say. Next thing that came to mind, because I had two and then there was only one.
This is
It 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 disappeared.
it disappeared. Well, it'll come back, and this is. I was like, I mean, I was reading this article. Like, apparently, the internet has literally changed our memory. Like, it is so much harder because we have so much information, and you're on book tour, which is even more overstimulating. But yeah, I always like we're all in a constant state of brain fog. But so on a policy level. Right. Like what you've shared earlier in our chat, is what you can do kind of, or what sort of differentiated this good billionaire from the rest was a lot of sort of personal choices and
Mm.
values. Is there anything on a policy level that can encourage that kind of attitude, right? Like, I think, again, I don't want to stress too much that he had French Canadian roots, but I find it very interesting because it does like, when I go home, my parents think I'm an alien, truly. Like just because I live in America and I'm, probably on I recycle, um I ride my city bike, but I think that there's just a very different culture in Canada, in the way that there's a very different culture in Scandinavian countries.
Sure.
Of just more emphasis on redistribution, more emphasis also on like you're not special, and if you think you're special, that's kind of cringe, as opposed to the States, which is like you're special and like you're right this extraordinary not just country, but people within that country and like show off and right. And it is, I think for a lot of Americans, it just seems like that's normal and that's like human nature, but it's actually societal, right? It's encouraged. So yeah, like, is there anything on the policy level that you think could encourage more people like this good former billionaire?
Because I like that. He'll be very happy you said former. Um, I mean, sure, but to pass those sort of policies, we need a government
Yeah.
that embodies those kind of values, and we don't
Hmm.
have that. So, I mean, like, forget policies. Right now, we need
Yeah.
voters. If that's the kind of change
Hmm.
you want to see, if you want to see change that involves policies that hold billionaires accountable and makes it more difficult for individuals to accumulate massive wealth while many of most people in this country are still struggling to survive. Well,
Hmm.
then you need representatives who share those values. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that that's not the current makeup of
Yeah.
our Congress or of the executive branch.
Yeah.
And so, like, my last book about GE and Jack Welch, I got into some of more of the policy proposals. I think rather than policy proposals, what I try to do in this book is show that, like, Patagonia is in some ways a unicorn, right? Like, no one can recreate his life and no company can ever be Patagonia. So let's like stop pretending that that's what this is all about. What I think it shows, though, is that a group of individuals can make a deliberate set of choices
Hmm.
that, to use your words earlier, are focused on maintaining and advancing a set of values that they really care about.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson here is that, right? Oh, I remember what I was going to say, right? Well, I do. And it's relevant for this
I
as
knew
well.
it would come back.
Here you go. Here you go. You talked about, like what it would take for some of these tech CEOs to maybe shift directions.
Yeah.
Let me use this example. Multiple times in this book, I cite examples when Chenard and his company realized that the products that they're making are having a harmful impact in the world.
Mhm.
And when they did make those discoveries, they don't sweep it under the rug. They
Mhm.
don't hire McKinsey to make a 5-year plan to fix it. They say, we are no longer making those products, full stop.
Uh,
Sometimes early in the company's trajectory, that meant like a 80, 90% drop in revenues, and they had to like start a new company.
mhm.
Sometimes that meant a 20% drop in revenues, but by that time they were making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So that's a big deal then.
Mhm.
But they were so clear that if they understood that what they were putting into the world was going to be really harmful, they wanted nothing to do with it.
Mm,
It wasn't even a debate. They just did it.
mm, mhm.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the leaders of, say, a social media company learning that their products were harmful to young people and especially young women and saying, you know what? We don't want to be in that business. We're done. We're
Yeah.
out. We'll try to fix it. But in the immediate, no mas. That's not the world we live in. And
Mm,
so, right, I guess I'm long on the odds of tech
mhm.
CEOs magically sort of coming to their, some place where they are going to sacrifice corporate profits in the
Mhm.
name of some higher moral standard. Oh,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question, Liz, which is, some of these CEOs, I'm thinking about that dinner. uh,
Mm,
Realistically, I think I may be oversimplifying things here a little, but I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that sort of the cost of part of being a CEO of one of these big companies right now is showing up to events like that.
mhm.
I could imagine, I don't know, I'm not saying this about any one CEO in particular, but I could imagine that if there was a CEO of a big company that routinely said, no thanks, I'm not
Yeah.
showing up at those things,
Yeah.
They might lose their job, right? And that would be a costly choice for them, right? To the
Mhm.
tune of like tens or potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. These men, mostly men, are extraordinarily well paid. So here's the question. Liz, would you go to dinner with Donald Trump and sit at the White House and play nice for $100 million? Right? Would you? This is the choice that some people are in.
Mhm.
And the only thing I will say is I know one man who absolutely would
Would.
not do it.
There we go, guys. That's a great I mean, would I do it? I would think not, but, um, I would think not, but here's what I'll say, I'm not convinced they're just doing it for the money.
Yeah.
I think some of them maybe,
Okay.
but Mark Zuckerberg, I don't think that's for the money. Elon Musk, I don't think that's for the money. I think it's, um I would love to be a fly on the wall with them in therapy, which they're probably not in, but I think that there's something I don't know. I've never been that rich, so who cares what I think, but I think when you have that much power and you have that much money, I don't even know if that is what's motivating you
Yeah.
as much as, anyway,
I know.
something
I
else.
agree. I think there's many forces at work
Yeah,
here, including, um, you know, sort of the pursuit of power for power's sake, which I
right.
think is a dynamic that plays out
Yes,
across politics and business in all
sure.
sorts of really
Mhm,
insidious but very powerful and enduring ways.
mhm.
What I'll note again about this story is that he never gave a damn about either of those things.
Yeah,
Chenard and Patagonia managed to find ways to be influential. But just in the same way that I said he never set out to like be an entrepreneur or build a company. He never set out to like acquire wealth for wealth's sake
yeah.
or accumulate power for
Mhm,
power's sake. And
mhm.
so charting the influence is a much different project
Right,
than it
right.
was in, if you look at any of those big companies or a company like GE. And
Yeah,
instead, you the way to really see it in the world is to go back to those things that I said shaped him as a boy.
yeah,
His love of nature,
yeah,
because when you look at the way he has spent his money, and Patagonia has used its influence and its profits over the years, it all comes back to conservation,
yeah.
to grassroots activisms. And
Mhm,
there again is that consistency in values, right? The
mhm,
same things he cared about because it was who he was, that he
mhm.
cared about as a boy and as a young man are still the same things he cares about today. And they're
Yeah.
still the same things that are shaping this company going forward.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, David. This was a really fascinating conversation and also kind of a lesson for any of us, no matter how much money we have, to just like, and even sort of the times that we're in, to really stay connected to who we are, stay connected to our values. Um, I know that in the last few days, it's been tempting to deviate and tempting to um, lose ourselves and lose those anchoring values. And to me, this is a reminder to stay connected to them. I appreciate you, David. I appreciate everyone who joined us for this
Thanks, everyone.
fascinating chat. We'll have to have you back again.
Anytime.
And yeah, everyone go buy David's book. David wrote Billionaire. It's available wherever you buy your books. Support your local bookstores. Do you want to plug anything else? Where are you going to be speaking, or where do you want people to come and find you?
You can find all that information on my website, which is just davidgevis.com, and it's Dirtbag Billionaire. I'm so grateful. It was such a fun chat, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your incredible reporting. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your night, wherever you
Bye.
are. Bye.